The pink wog, very deadly for all salmon whites, and catch an amazingly big rainbow trout on it too. For tying the pink wog that I tie, I usually use Daiichi 2050 ones, size 3. I really like the hook. It's a fairly light wire hook, but with even a turned up eye, a lot of times they have a hard time hooking, but this hook really works well. The other hook is this Gamakatsu, the B10S. That works really well. All right, just put it in your vise. The hardest part for most people is getting the knot down for starting. And you just work your way back over the thread. And take it all back. A lot of people put down a full layer. I don't bother with that anymore. Okay, we trim that off. When you trim material off too, pull on it to make sure you got a nice tight pull. All right, now we're gonna take a marabou plume out of here. And this is what you get when you buy a 1/4 ounce of marabou. Give it a nice pull and it'll come out. We're not going to use the whole feather. When you go to cut feathers and stuff, make sure you separate it to the stem so you don't wind up with a lot of waste, because there's some other stuff you can do with this. So I'm just going to reach in, cut the stem, and I'm going to pull it back. We're going to set it right on top of the hook. Now, before we do that, make sure it's about the hook shank length, okay? It could be a little longer, but I find that's about the right length. And that's a standard measurement when you're tying flies. The hook shank, the length of it, and then the gap on the hook. Again, I'm going to cut the marabou, but I'm going to pull up on it pretty hard and lay my scissors right along the hook shank. Cut, discard. Now we're going to take it right to the back. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on here. This Loctite super glue, this control gel, is really easy to use. Much better than some of the other glues, because you can just squeeze it and get the amount you want. Now, the body, all you need to do is go to like a Micol or one of those and buy foam. You don't go to your fly shop. You get a whole sheet of foam for a couple bucks. Now, we're just going to cut a triangle out of it. So there's no need to have an extra tool to cut it or anything. And we're going to square it off a little bit. Like that. We're going to set it on the hook shank. And we want to look to see how far it's going to stick out beyond the hook shank. All right, tie that down. Fairly firm turns, but you got to be careful with some of the foam. You can cut it. All right, fold that forward. This material here is polar chenille, and it's got a UV flash in it. You can kind of, I don't know if you can see it or not, it's kind of got this bluish tint to it. That stuff I find really works well with salmon. Now I'm not sure they see UV, but they must see it somehow, because a lot of times UV makes a big difference. So I've tied that in. We're going to carry that all the way to the front, and when we get to where the shank turns back and forms the eye, I don't know if you can see that right there, that's where we're going to stop with our body material. All right? I'm going to make one turn though over the foam. And this material here is quite abraded, so it toughens that section up so the fish can't tear it up too much. And you make even turns. I like to pull the material back just a little bit. It makes it a little fuller. Going forward. Now when I get up here, I'm going to tie this off. And I usually only use a couple turns of thread. If you tight everything, it'll stay together. Now I used to do deer hair up here, but it's a little more work, and I found that just by using Schleppen or saltwater grade hackle, it works just fine. And I'll pick out one of those, one with some fairly long fibers. I got two, okay. And again, I'm going to trim it. Just the stem is going to be cut. All right. Pull a little bit off the end, so you got something to tie down to. All right, that goes on. that down. And I'm going to take it, you know, maybe 1/4 inch or so forward. Grab it with my hackle pliers. And when you're at an electrical supply shop, these are the best hackle pliers you can get. And they're like $3. Now we're going to do some nice even turns, but I'm going to keep folding the hackle back. And to do that, all I'm doing is just taking my thumb and forefinger and stroking it back. I always like to leave a little extra room. A lot of guys, you know, beginning tyers particularly, have a tendency to pile the material and wind up being stuck at the head, where I always try to leave extra room, especially with turned up eye hooks. Because a lot of times you're going to want to tie a knot that rests on the shank of the hook so you get a better, straighter pull. All right, now we're going to take this and we're going to fold this down on either side, pull it down, the hackle, and I'm going to put some glue up there. Take the foam back and pull it over the back and press it down so it starts adhering. Now I'm going to take and put several turns of thread over the top of it. Again, not pulling it too tight, just tight enough. And then for support, this will work, but I found that adding an extra piece of foam across the back will provide some support. Again, this is foam from, you know, craft shop, Micol, something like that. I'll cut it so I square it up. And I usually take the back off. I used to leave the V sticking up, but I found it get tore up a little more. Cut that. I'm going to put some glue right here. So when I stick these two pieces together, it'll look like this. All right. Now I'm going to bend everything back and a few turns. I like to put a little extra glue on there. I was watching a seminar one time with Dave Whitlock, and he was showing this. This was probably 25, 30 years ago. And he just did that and then just trimmed it off, and the flies stayed together. So since I've been using super glue, the flies almost never come apart. And I whip finish. Pull it tight, trim it off. Then I'll take some glue and put it in between the two pieces of foam. Not too much, just enough. Push them down until they adhere. And we're done. Very simple, very easy to tie. I've shown people who have no tying experience and they can crank those babies right out. And it's very effective. What I usually do too now is I'll look at the front of the fly and do a little trim here, shorten it up just a little bit. Sometimes if you leave it longer, it makes a bigger pop, but I find, you know, about 1/2 inch or so of that in the front is enough to do the job.